With amendment, Mr. Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. This bill is set down for third reading next sitting day. Call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2, first reading.
Mr. Speaker,
The Honourable David Carter.
I move that the Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2 be now read for a first time. I nominate the Justice and Electoral Committee to consider the bill. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported back to the House on or before 11 March 2013. The Local Electoral Act 2001, which sets the rules for the conduct of local elections every 3 years, has as one of its principles that the public have confidence in and understand the local electoral processes. The Act also provides for fair and effective representation for individuals and communities and aims to provide people with a reasonable and equal opportunity to cast an informed vote and to accept nomination as a candidate. Mr. Speaker, there has been significant changes since the Local Electoral Act was enacted, both in terms of the changing landscape of the local government sector and amendments to the Electoral Act, the legislation which regulates parliamentary elections. Simply put, the legislation governing local government elections has not kept pace with the changes imposed on central government political candidates. This bill strengthens the Local Electoral Act to ensure it meets its principles and to bring it closer into line with the provisions of the Electoral Act. A number of amendments in this bill implement the government's response to the findings of the Justice and Electoral Committee in the conduct of the 2010 local authority elections. The amendments also reflect the government's response to the Local Government Commission's 2008 statutory review of the Act. Mr. Speaker, the bill improves the balance between requirement for fair and effective representation of communities by territorial authorities. Councils will have more flexibility in setting ward boundaries that reflect existing communities. The amendments also streamline technical aspects of the representation review process. In short, the bill will give electors more effective democratic representation. This bill will also ensure electors have better information when deciding who to vote for. Candidates will need to declare if they're standing for more than one elected position. Candidates will also have to declare if they live in the local area for the positions they are contesting. In addition, the bill will streamline the production of voting documents and candidate nomination processes. Mr. Speaker, this bill will also increase the openness and the accountability in local elections through new and enhanced provisions for the receipt, disclosure, reporting and recording of donations, especially anonymous donations. Legislation surrounding anonymous donations has needed to be improved for some time. As it now stands, the current legislation has unnecessarily created uncertainty and confusion in the local government elections. This bill provides that certainty. The bill contains provisions which are modelled on existing checks and balances in the Electoral Act, which covers, of course, parliamentary elections, but adapted to apply to local elections. Having similar provisions across both the parliamentary and the local electoral systems will make it easier for candidates, for donors and for others involved in local elections. The key changes proposed in the area of donations include the expanding of the definition of anonymous to mirror the descriptions in the Electoral Act. That is, to include situations where the candidate could not reasonably know the identity of the donor. In addition, Where a donor gives a donation to a third party to pass on to a candidate and the third party knows the identity of the donor, the third party will have to disclose this information to the candidate. So the donation cannot be treated as anonymous. Anonymous donations will also have a limit of $1,500, the same as is in the Electoral Act. If a candidate receives an anonymous donation over that limit, they cannot keep the excess but will have to give it to the electoral officer appointed by the local authority to conduct that election. The bill also increases the obligations on candidates to record and report on the donations they receive. I do not consider the obligations to be onerous, as most would be reasonably expected from the efficient financial and administrative practice. New penalty provisions will accompany and enforce the new obligations. Those who are found guilty of breaching the law will be held accountable and could be liable on conviction for a fine. Mr. Speaker, the local amendment Electoral Bill number 2 will strengthen the integrity of the Local Electoral Act, enhance the transparency and efficiency of the local electoral system and the representation of electors, and as a result, increase the public's confidence in the local electoral system as being efficient, democratic and transparent. I commend this bill to the House and hope that it finds good support from all parties across the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable